Jean-Jacques Rousseau's 1762 treatise, Emile or On Education, stands as a monumental and revolutionary work in the history of educational philosophy. Far from being a dry academic text, Rousseau masterfully blends philosophical exposition with a captivating novelistic narrative, illustrating his radical ideas through the hypothetical upbringing of a boy named Emile from birth until his marriage to Sophie. This ambitious project seeks to delineate a pedagogical path that nurtures the individual in harmony with nature, challenging the prevailing conventions of 18th century European society. Rousseau opens Emile with a profound assertion about the inherent goodness of humanity. Everything is good as it comes from the hands of the author of nature, but everything degenerates in the hands of man. This core tenet underpins his entire educational philosophy. For Rousseau, the societal structures, artificial customs, and rigid educational systems of his time corrupted the natural inclinations of children, leading to vice and unhappiness. His solution? A return to nature both literally and figuratively. The early years of Emile's upbringing are meticulously crafted to exemplify this principle. Emile, an orphan from a wealthy family, is raised in the countryside, far from the suffocating confines and corrupting influences of urban life. The fresh air, open spaces, and natural rhythms of rural existence are deemed essential for his physical and moral development. Rousseau entrusts Emile to an experienced tutor, also named Jean-Jacques, who acts as a constant guiding presence, subtly orchestrating experiences rather than overtly dictating lessons. The emphasis on natural forces is paramount. When Emile falls ill, his tutor relies on the body's intrinsic healing capabilities, shunning medicine unless absolutely necessary. The child's diet is healthy and predominantly vegetarian, reflecting a simple, unadorned existence. Clothing is designed not to restrict movement, allowing Emile to explore and engage with his environment freely. Even the most fundamental human expressions, like a baby's cries, are reinterpreted, not as malevolence but as a sign of weakness. Rousseau's first maxim for Emile's infancy stresses this: all wickedness comes from weakness. The child is only evil because he is weak. Make him strong, and he will be good. This radical perspective shifts the blame for childhood misbehaviour from an inherent depravity to a lack of physical and emotional strength. Crucially, Emile's desires are not indulged indiscriminately. Demands exceeding natural needs are ignored, teaching him to confront the necessities of nature. If he cries out in a fit of rage, his pleas are unmet. If he falls while learning to walk, he is allowed to experience the pain and learn from it. This hands-off approach to immediate gratification is a cornerstone of Rousseau's method, allowing the child to discover the limits of his own actions and the immutable laws of the natural world. In a world accustomed to strict discipline and immediate correction, this radical allowance for self-correction through experience was truly groundbreaking. Even the development of speech is left to nature's timetable. The tutor uses simple, understandable words, refraining from direct instruction or correction. Instead, he models correct language, allowing Emile to absorb and imitate naturally. The rural setting further aids this, as the need to be heard over natural sounds encourages clear and loud articulation, much like the peasants. This early emphasis on organic learning, driven by innate curiosity and necessity, sets the stage for Emile's later intellectual development. The 7 pedagogical principles. Rousseau's revolutionary framework. Rousseau's educational philosophy in Emile can be distilled into 7 core pedagogical principles, each a departure from the conventional wisdom of his era and a foundational element of his reform-minded approach. The intrinsic value of childhood. One must regard the adult as an adult and the child as a child, Rousseau declares. This profound statement encapsulates his revolutionary view of childhood. For Rousseau, childhood is not merely a preparatory stage for adulthood, a period to be rushed through or sacrificed for an uncertain future. Instead, he champions it as an independent, complete and valuable phase of life, in its own right. Children are not miniature adults to be moulded, but unique beings with their own distinct needs, capacities and ways of experiencing the world. This principle advocates for respecting the integrity of childhood and allowing it to unfold naturally, rather than prematurely imposing adult expectations or obligations. The study of childhood. Rousseau begins, Emile with a powerful indictment of his contemporaries. One does not know childhood. With the false ideas one has of it, one goes astray all the more, the further one proceeds. He argues that society's misguided attempts to transform children into citizens as quickly as possible ignore their fundamental nature. A child still deeply connected to nature is primarily engaged in developing their senses, organs, and limbs. To suppress these primal feelings, inclinations, and needs too early with imposed ideals, taught habits, and misunderstood duties, Rousseau warns, leads to a fractured individual who works against their own true potential. This principle emphasizes the crucial importance of observing and understanding the child's natural development before attempting to educate them. Negative education. Rousseau's concept of negative education is perhaps one of his most misunderstood yet pivotal ideas. It is not about inaction or neglect. Rather, it is primarily about preventing harm or corruption. Rousseau argues that the goal is not to gain time, but to lose time, allowing the child to develop at their own pace. The initial education, he states, should not instruct the child in virtue and truth, but it must preserve the heart from vice and the mind from error. Before the age of 12, when a child's reason begins to awaken, moral concepts should not be directly imposed. Instead, the child should be educated through the necessity of things. This leads to a demoralization of pedagogy, where nature itself becomes the primary educator. However, this is not a passive surrender. The tutor actively orchestrates the environment to bring about nature's influence, subtly shaping the child according to the desired outcome. Sexuality. Rousseau held surprisingly restrictive views on sexual education. He believed children should be kept in complete ignorance about sex and sexuality. After puberty, while direct questions might be answered, the tutor should provide information as sparingly as possible. The sexual organs and functions are to be presented as repulsive, dangerous, and to be strictly controlled. Aspects of human existence. This approach, while seeming contradictory to his emphasis on nature, reveals Rousseau's deep-seated concern with the corrupting influence of premature or uncontrolled sexual desires on a developing moral character. He sought to delay sexual awareness and channel emerging passions towards higher, more virtuous ends. Experiential learning. Rousseau identifies three teachers: nature, people, and things. Nature develops our capacities and strengths. People teach us how to use those capacities, and things educate us through the experience we gain from them and through intuition. The educator's task is to ensure that these three teachers are in equilibrium. Otherwise, the student will be poorly educated and perpetually at odds with themselves. The ultimate goal of education aligns with nature's own purpose, as nature cannot be influenced, while people and things can, at least in part. Therefore, the other two must be aligned with nature. Crucially, Rousseau advocates for the renunciation of power over the student. Never command him anything whatsoever. He only needs to know that he is weak and you are strong, that he is therefore necessarily dependent on you. This, he believes, fosters a healthy relationship free from the usual power dynamics of submission. All coercion is to be replaced by necessity, which is more comprehensible to the child. With the bond of necessity, one binds, drives, or holds him back, without his grumbling. The mere power of things makes him docile and obedient. Rousseau criticizes the curricula of his time for confronting learners with content that has no immediate, recognizable meaning for them. This connection to one's own life reality is essential for learning to occur, as it mirrors natural learning processes. Rousseau states, "If one follows according to the outline I have begun to draw, rules that are directly opposite to the usual ones, if one does not incessantly lead the spirit of one's pupil afar, if one does not let him wander to other places, into other climes, into other centuries, to the ends of the earth, even to the sky, but rather endeavours to keep him always attentive to himself and to what immediately concerns him, then one will find him capable of feeling, retaining, and even judging. This is the order of nature. This emphasis on present experience and immediate relevance is central to his vision of learning." Developmental stages of education. Rousseau's observations led him to delineate 4 distinct phases of childhood and youth, each with specific educational priorities. Infancy, age of nature, birth to 3 years. The child who cannot yet speak or speaks imperfectly. Children must be allowed to use their limited strengths, and their drive to explore must not be suppressed. Their lack of strength must be compensated, and they must be assisted, but only for natural and necessary needs. nutrition, hygiene, protection. Rousseau asserts, the education of man begins at birth. Before he speaks, before he hears, he learns already. Experience precedes instruction. Boyhood, age of strength approximately 3 to approximately 12 years. The boy. This phase is dedicated to physical training, dexterity, and sharpening perceptions. This is achieved practically through work, exploration, imitation, and play, where the child acquires abilities through self-activity, trial, and error. The greatest value is placed on personal experiences and the resulting understanding of the world. Pre-adolescence, age of reason approximately 12 to approximately 15 years. The strengthened child before puberty. In this phase, the awakening intellect and reason are addressed, meaning formal instruction and studies begin. But the goal is not to teach sciences, but that he finds pleasure in them, loves them, and that he acquires the methods to learn them when this preference is better developed. This is certainly a fundamental principle of all good education. The guiding question becomes, what is it good for? This is now the sacred word that decides everything we do in our lives between him and me. The objective at the end of this phase is a hard-working, moderate, strong, patient, and above all, discerning child who possesses few but thorough insights. This stands in contrast to the half-educated children of his age who engage in many subjects, ancient languages, physics, history, but understand little. Adolescence, age of insight, approximately 15 to approximately 20 years. The time of maturity. The being who has hitherto acted and thought now also becomes a loving and feeling being, and with this a new kind of dependence threatens, that on a beloved person. Until now the child only knew self-love. Passions unknown to the child before now threaten to overwhelm the adolescent. How can one master passion, love, and remain independent? Rousseau's measures include, the educator becomes a friend whom the pupil needs. Passions are deprived of their intensity by exposing them to activities like sports, hunting, and hiking. Besides self-love, pity, mitleid, is the second primal emotion. It should be awakened and fostered in the adolescent. The study of literature and history should teach the pupil to see people as they are from the perspective of an observer. The pupil is given concepts, ideas, and a conception of the whole, thus introducing religion. The educator carefully selects the pupil's companion himself, letting the pupil form an idea of her, and this conceived ideal then becomes the benchmark for every real woman, the citizen's education. Emile is not made to remain always alone. As a member of a community, he must fulfill its duties. The pupil, hitherto educated for independence in solitude, must ultimately be capable of entering into the social contract and existing within the community. Within him awakens the longing for a companion, whereupon his educator allows him to experience and overcome the preciousness and problems of human bonding through a woman chosen for him. This serves as preparation for the greater contractual community, society, which the pupil is later to enter. This requires knowledge of human nature, and it is no longer sufficient to acquire this solely through reading. It must be tested and applied. Therefore, the young man will embark on a longer journey through Europe, during which he will test himself, concretize his wishes and ideas for the future. He compares foreign lands with his homeland to then make a free choice. With which people, in which country, does he want to build his existence and enter into the social contract as a member of the community? The natural religion. The natural religion, as conceived by Rousseau, is founded on experiences and reflections accessible to everyone. Emile is not to have a worldview imposed upon him. Instead, he is to be allowed to choose the one to which his own reasoned opinion leads him. This emphasizes a personal, experiential connection to the divine rather than dogmatic instruction, allowing for individual conscience and understanding to guide spiritual belief. This approach aligns with his broader philosophy of nurturing an independent, self-reliant individual. The awakening of self, from sensation to understanding. The second phase of Emile's development, spanning roughly from ages 5 to 12, marks a significant shift, the emergence of self-awareness. Rousseau declares, now man becomes aware of himself. It is therefore so important to consider him from now on as a spiritual being. The tutor's primary task becomes fostering Emile's humanity, embracing his innate goodness and allowing his individuality to blossom. This means rejecting the punitive pedagogical methods of the era that sought to crush perceived evil tendencies in children. Rousseau's philosophy here is deeply entwined with his concept of happiness. He posits that true happiness lies not in unlimited desires, but in a perfect equilibrium between desires and abilities. The truly free man wants only what he can and does only what suits him. Misery, conversely, arises from the disparity between our aspirations and our realities. This insight leads to a call for living naturally, patiently, and without the constant anxiety of an uncertain future. We no longer exist where we are, but only where we are not. This profound psychological observation points to the human tendency to live in a perpetual state of anticipation, missing the richness of the present moment. Maintaining this equilibrium for children requires compensating for their natural weaknesses with affection. Reasonable desires are met without negotiation, while unreasonable selfish ones are met with the unyielding resistance of nature. The tutor doesn't scold or punish. Instead, he allows Emile to experience the natural consequences of his actions. If Emile wantonly breaks a window, it is not replaced, and he suffers the cold, learning directly from his mistake. This concept of self-instruction through experience is a hallmark of Rousseau's pedagogy, promoting internal understanding rather than external coercion. It's a subtle, yet powerful form of guidance, where the environment rather than overt authority delivers the lesson. Rousseau's Emile is not just an educational treatise, it's a scathing social critique. He lambasts parents who project their own desires and perceived needs onto their children, often influenced by societal pressures. He envisions a society where laws possess the unwavering force of nature, transcending individual whims. This echoes his ideas in The Social Contract, where he argues for a collective will that governs justly. For education, this means avoiding conventional reward and punishment systems that activate dangerous passions like rivalry, jealousy, and vanity, which Rousseau saw as corrupting the natural innocence of the child. Personality formation under Rousseau's tutelage prioritizes substance over superficiality. He criticizes the aristocratic lifestyle, its extravagance, dependence, and rigid adherence to etiquette, and champions a simple, sustainable way of life. The ideal is autonomy and freedom. He decries authoritarian teaching methods, rote memorization, and a traditional curriculum that prioritizes ancient languages and abstract knowledge over a child's understanding and needs. Famously, he criticizes La Fontaine's fables for promoting deceit and mocking the naive, arguing that they present a cynical view of the world unsuitable for innocent minds. Instead of theoretical natural science, Emile learns directly from nature. He engages in gardening and healthy eating, experiencing firsthand the processes of growth and sustenance. Instead of book-bound geography, he learns to navigate his immediate surroundings. These activities are not merely practical, they strengthen both mind and body. The motivation to read comes naturally when Emile receives letters and genuinely desires to understand their content. Rousseau elaborates on various play situations designed to train the senses, develop spatial awareness, overcome fear, and strengthen muscles. He recounts an anecdote where Emile initially participates in a running exercise for a cake, but eventually the prize becomes irrelevant, demonstrating the shift from external reward to intrinsic motivation. Music, painting, and sports are all embraced, not for their artistic perfection, but for their ability to train senses and organs and foster a connection with materials. The uninitiated artist, Emile, paints directly from nature, studying its proportions and abstracting them into geometric drawings. This is a profound shift from a curriculum focused on predetermined knowledge to one that encourages discovery and direct engagement with the world. The dawn of sentiment, love, morality, and social consciousness. The fourth stage, spanning from approximately 15 to 20 years old, is the period of puberty. Emile becomes aware of his sexuality, moving beyond individual existence to an interest in a partner. This necessitates the integration of the social aspect into his education. Regarding sexual education, Rousseau advises the tutor to be reserved, yet provide simple, straightforward explanations. More important than biology is morality, as the tutor must prevent sexual urges from leading to inhumane excesses. Instead, Emile should be guided toward gentle and tender passions, in line with his natural disposition. The complexities and temptations of urban society are deemed far more dangerous than the simplicity of rural life. To delay overt sexual activity, Jean-Jacques directs Emile's attention to other pursuits, physical and manual labour, hunting and intellectual engagement with the ancients, which are preferable to the chatter of academies and newspapers. Theatre visits are also encouraged for amusement and the study of human emotions and their allure, providing a safe distance for observation. In this period of heightened emotions for friendships and love, Rousseau's pedagogy rests on suffering and compassion, the first relational feeling that touches the human heart according to the order of nature. He articulates three maxims that serve as a blueprint for cultivating empathy. It is not in the human heart to empathize with those happier than us, but only with those who are more unfortunate. We only lament the sufferings of others, from which we do not believe ourselves secure. Compassion for the sufferings of others is not determined by the magnitude of the evil, but by the feeling one attributes to the sufferers, whether one considers them lamentable. These maxims suggest a pragmatic approach to fostering empathy, rooted in self-preservation and relatable experience. With the formation of a friendship, Emile enters the moral order, the second step of humanization. This brings the challenge of navigating society, comparing himself to others, and discerning the true character behind a facade. To provide perspective, Jean-Jacques introduces Emile to people from other times and places. Plutarch's anecdotal portrayals of historical figures, which expose the failures of many powerful individuals, are deemed particularly suitable. Now, the previously skeptically viewed fables which expose human weaknesses find their place in Emile's education. He will recognize his own shortcomings, and the fables will help him process these deficits without humiliation or compromising his good-natured character. By the end of this development, Emile is a self-possessed individual who follows his own path. He does what he believes is good and useful, approaches people without prejudice, with compassion, and will eventually become a representative of the oppressed and unfortunate, standing with persistent determination, even to the steps of the throne. This vision of Emile as a compassionate advocate for justice highlights Rousseau's ideal of a socially conscious individual. Emile's education also addresses the realm of natural religion. While he has been taught to do no evil, he has heard nothing of religion in his early youth. Now, within a social context, he is confronted with it. Rousseau presents the profession of faith of the Savoyard vicar, whose concept of a harmonious and benevolent cosmic order forms the basis of his pedagogy. Drawing on his studies of philosophers like Descartes, the vicar asserts his self-awareness, his limited understanding, and his awareness of the universe. From this foundation of deism or natural religion, he deduces several articles of faith. All original movement arises from a spontaneous, willful act. Without will, there is no true action. Matter moving according to certain laws points to an intelligence. Man is free in his actions and, as such, is animated by an immaterial substance. The vicar concludes that there is an intelligent creator God, rejecting the hypothesis of a cosmos formed by random material connections. Creation is designed for harmony and preservation, and rational man should live in accordance with nature and develop his good qualities. In the second part of his discourse, the vicar examines various religions, all claiming to be the sole truth, yet relying only on the statements of individual prophets and their books, rather than a message addressed to all humanity. He discovers many contradictions to rational thought in these scriptures, but also commonalities in charity. From this, he infers that religions could coexist peacefully, nurturing their shared human core in their interactions. This plea for religious tolerance and a universal moral code derived from nature was revolutionary for its time. A pivotal moment is the change of roles. At 20, Emile is at an age of increasing danger from the blind impulse of his senses. Jean-Jacques, no longer able to fully protect him, withdraws from direct leadership and transfers responsibility for Emile's actions to him. He now acts as a paternal friend, warning him of dangers. To maintain their trust, he accounts for his goals and methods and discusses their future relationship. With eloquent enthusiasm, he paints a picture of a happy future, the joys of friendship, love, fidelity, marriage and family, emphasizing the sanctity of his duty. To support Emile's reason with his own experience during this difficult developmental phase, this leads Emile to voluntarily accept his tutor's guidance and authority, almost without realizing it. This pact is solemnly sealed, signifying a new phase of shared responsibility. The next step is the search for a partner. Jean-Jacques, however, does not use his authority to further delay Emile's sexual development. Instead, he actively seeks a companion for him, aptly named Sophie, meaning wisdom. He describes her virtues, awakening Emile's imagination and passion for his future beloved and wife, elevating his sexual desire to the level of contemplation and sublimation. This protects Emile from the negative influence of false friends and casual encounters with women. His demeanour in society, a reflection of his education, is appealing to women. He is a lovable stranger, modest and polite yet not subservient, friendly and reserved in conversation but naturally self-confident, clear-minded but aware of his limited knowledge, patient in listening but independent of others' opinions. Realising that his ideal woman is unlikely to be found in Paris, Jean-Jacques and Emile embark on travels. They wander leisurely, exploring nature and even getting lost, until one evening, the mentor, accidentally, leads Emile to Sophie's parents' house. This seemingly spontaneous encounter is a carefully orchestrated culmination of Emile's education, setting the stage for the final phase of his life. Sophie, the complement to Emile and the nature of gender. The fifth and final book of Emile brings the two narrative strands together, focusing on the education of Sophie and her eventual union with Emile. This section has been a source of considerable debate and criticism due to Rousseau's views on girls' education, which stand in stark contrast to his revolutionary approach for boys. Rousseau, despite acknowledging shared common sense, posits fundamental nature-based differences between the sexes. The woman, he argues, is created to please man and to submit, to be useful to him, to be loved and respected by him, to care for him, to advise him, to comfort him, and to provide him with a pleasant and sweet existence. Her power lies in her charms. Through modesty and shame, she subjugates the stronger sex. Her good reputation in public opinion is crucial. However, she's not merely a housewife and mother. She should think, judge, love, and recognise that she cultivates her mind as she does her appearance. These are her weapons that nature gives her as a substitute for her lack of strength. Through her special cunning, she dominates man by submitting to him. But she needs to learn only what is appropriate for her to know. These differences dictate the education of girls, which must prepare them for their duties to men at all times, albeit with the caveat of meritorious, truly lovable men. Girls must understand societal structures and rules, but their studies should be practical. The exploration of abstract and speculative truths and exact natural sciences is not deemed suitable for women. She applies the principles discovered by men and reflects upon them. The works of the mind, Rousseau believes, exceed the capacity of women. She cannot recognise anything outside herself. The woman observes and the man thinks. From this cooperation arise the clearest insights and the most perfect science that the human mind can acquire from itself. This highly utilitarian and gender-segregated view of intellectual development is a significant point of critique for modern readers. Despite these limitations, the methods of Jean-Jacques' pedagogy for girls are essentially similar to those for boys. Loving care without exaggeration, the virtuous mother as a role model, time for play, and the development of natural qualities according to their inclinations, a practical religion of the heart without incomprehensible catechism, doctrines, few rules, and punishments. For rural settings, leaving girls in profound ignorance about everything except daily tasks is considered acceptable. In the peaceful and domestic life of the parental home, they acquire a sense of home through their mother's upbringing. This suggests a more organic, less formal education for rural girls. However, in urban society, where true family life is absent, marriages are often formal, and girls are raised in convents before being exposed to society unprepared. This lack of autonomy is dangerous. To prevent this, girls should learn about places of amusement, balls, festivals, and games through observation to protect themselves from the deceptive image of happiness. Through the depiction of a virtuous man of merit, they can discover the virtue of love and love him for his own sake. Even if this love, guided by reason, is an illusion, the feelings that open her to true beauty are real. This highlights Rousseau's concern for moral purity, even in urban settings. Rousseau advocates for free partner choice based on affection, but acknowledges certain social barriers for a happy marriage. Ideally, there should be financial, ethical, and educational equality. His advice: strive for moderation in everything, without even excluding beauty. If this is not the case, a man, unlike a woman, should not marry above his station, as he would not be considered equal by his in-laws, or even his wife. A belletristic woman, or a great beauty, is also not recommended. One, in the sublime heights of her beautiful soul, detests all feminine duties, while the other is exposed to many temptations in society. The author considers the reverse inequality less problematic, as the man elevates his wife to his level. These prescriptive guidelines reveal Rousseau's practical, and often conservative, concerns regarding social harmony and marital stability. Sophie is presented as the embodiment of Rousseau's ideal woman, raised by her parents in the countryside. Like Émile, she is from a good family and of good nature, as well as a sensitive heart. Her temperament is good-natured yet balanced. She perfectly fits Jean-Jacques' ideal of a girl, allowing for small weaknesses, and is a perfect match for Emile. She is motivated by dance and music, sewing her clothes, the household management, the cleanliness in all things. She possesses an attractive but not brilliant mind, which is solid without being profound, and formed not by extensive reading but by conversations with her parents, her own reflections, and observations of people. This description reinforces the idea of an intellectually capable but domestically oriented woman. Sophie's parents have lost much of their fortune, but have accepted their circumstances, living modestly and contentedly in a village, having raised their daughter virtuously. Breaking with convention, Sophie is allowed to choose her husband, and her parents have a veto right. Her son-in-law does not have to be rich but must be honourable. When their daughter is 15, they discuss her future with her. Since no suitable young man can be found in the village, they entrust Sophie to her aunt in the city for the winter, who introduces her to society where she can look for a partner. However, she finds no one and returns sadly to her parents, her need for love unfulfilled. Her ideal man was found only in Fenelon's Adventures of Telemachus. This narrative choice highlights Sophie's initial disillusionment with real-world partners and her romanticized ideals, setting the stage for her eventual meeting with Emile, the union of souls, Sophie and Emile. The fateful encounter between Sophie and Emile occurs when Emile and his mentor, during their travels, accidentally seek lodging at Sophie's parents' home. The two young people quickly discover their spiritual kinship. Emile's tears over the unfortunate social decline of Sophie's parents reveal his empathy to her. He, in turn, is charmed by her sensibility and her shy, graceful manner. He immediately wants to find a dwelling near her, but his mentor tempers his enthusiasm, reminding him of the nature and honour of a virtuous girl. Emile receives permission from the parents for further visits. During subsequent meetings, they discover their similar life philosophies and their mutual love. Sophie's deficiencies in dance, music, philosophy, history, mathematics, and the natural sciences are compensated with Emile's help. She follows him with pleasure, understands everything, but retains little of it except in moral philosophy and religion. The emphasis is not on expanding her knowledge, but on their intellectual conversations and their growing familiarity through shared teaching and learning. This reciprocal learning, even with its inherent gendered roles, deepens their bond. Emile becomes increasingly emotionally dependent on his beloved. However, she takes her time, responding to his ardent courtship with a natural, feminine reserve. She awaits the development of their relationship, even after her initial concern about the financial disparity between their families, which Emile, who values money little, was oblivious to, is resolved. She enjoys modestly a victory that costs her her freedom. This nuanced statement captures the complex emotions of a woman finding love within the constraints of her societal role. During this courtship phase, Emile continues his studies in natural history and agriculture, advising farmers on cultivation methods, helping the poor and unfortunate, and working 2 days a week with his mentor in a carpentry shop. Sophie is impressed by this, especially by his assistance to an injured farmer and his pregnant wife, even though it caused him to miss a visit with her, leaving her worried by his silence. When he explains his priority of humanity over private pleasure, she spontaneously offers him her hand, asks him to become her husband and master, and helps care for the sick man and his wife. This climactic moment demonstrates Sophie's understanding and embrace of Emile's virtues. While Sophie, observing Emile at his carpentry work, recognizes that is the man, her beloved experiences a similar parallel situation. Watching her energetic care, disregarding dirt and foul smells, he thinks, "That is the woman." These mirrored epiphanies cement their bond, based on mutual respect for their complementary strengths and moral character. The ultimate test, becoming truly free. This idyllic happiness is interrupted by a crucial conversation between Emile and his mentor. Jean-Jacques warns him against a premature commitment driven solely by passion. Until now, Emile has only been seemingly free. A truly virtuous person must be able to conquer their desires and be willing to follow reason, conscience, and duty. All passions are good if one masters them. Nature forbids us to let our desires grow beyond our power. One transcends the limits of one's existence by considering the impossible possible in one's foolish desires. Jean-Jacques calls this the illusion of pride. Emile must now become truly free and learn to be his own master and to command his heart. He must learn to lose. This final challenge, the mastery of self, represents the culmination of Rousseau's entire educational project. Emile's journey is not merely about acquiring knowledge or skills, but about cultivating a moral autonomy that allows him to navigate the complexities of life with virtue, reason, and an authentic connection to his innate goodness. This profound final lesson emphasizes that true freedom is not the absence of constraint, but the internal capacity to choose virtue over impulse, even when it involves personal sacrifice or the relinquishing of a cherished desire. Conclusion: a legacy of contradictions and enduring influence. Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Emile is a work of immense scope and influence, a radical departure from the pedagogical norms of its time. It champions a child-centered approach, prioritizing natural development, experiential learning, and the cultivation of an individual's innate goodness. Rousseau's insistence on letting children learn from direct consequences, his rejection of rote memorization, and his emphasis on practical skills were revolutionary ideas that laid the groundwork for many modern educational theories. The concept of negative education, where the tutor actively prevents the child from being corrupted by societal influences rather than directly instructing, is a profound and enduring contribution. However, the book is not without its significant controversies, particularly concerning its starkly differentiated approaches to the education of boys and girls. While Emile is groomed for independence, reason, and active participation in society, Sophie is educated primarily to be a pleasing and submissive wife. Her intellectual pursuits curtailed to serve her domestic role. This dual standard reflects the deeply ingrained patriarchal norms of Rousseau's era, even as he challenged so many other conventions. This aspect of Emile remains a point of contention and a reminder of the historical context in which such groundbreaking works are produced. It forces modern readers to grapple with the inherent tensions between Rousseau's revolutionary ideals and his societal limitations. Despite these contradictions, Emile profoundly shaped subsequent educational thought. Its ideas resonated with figures of the Enlightenment and inspired educational reformers for centuries. The emphasis on nature, the recognition of distinct developmental stages, the importance of physical activity, and the cultivation of moral sentiment, all these elements found their way into later progressive educational movements, from Pestalozzi to Montessori and beyond. Rousseau's vision of the natural man, uncorrupted by societal artifice, continues to provoke thought and inspire debates about the true purpose and methods of education. It prompts us to reflect on the balance between individual freedom and societal integration, and the perennial question of how best to nurture human potential. In essence, Emile is more than just a pedagogical manual. It is a philosophical treatise on human nature, society, and the potential for individual flourishing. It challenges readers to reconsider their assumptions about childhood, learning, and the very fabric of social existence. It invites us to ponder, what does it truly mean to raise a free and virtuous human being? And how much of our own natural goodness have we allowed society to obscure? Its enduring relevance lies in its ability to spark these fundamental questions, even as its specific prescriptions invite ongoing critical examination.